A single dad saw a mother collapse at school, and her son's blood-curdling scream haunts everyone who heard it. But when he steps in to save them, a hidden truth threatens to shatter everything. Will love and faith be enough to turn heartbreak into hope? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the high windows of Lincoln High School's gymnasium, casting long rectangles of light across the polished wooden floor. Daniel Carter grabbed another metal folding chair from the stack, his movements precise and efficient from years of military training. Even now, years into civilian life, that discipline showed in everything he did. Dad, you know you don't have to help with every single school event, right? Emily, his 14-year-old daughter, stood nearby, her arms crossed but a fond smile playing on her lips. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, swaying as she shook her head at her father's predictable behavior. Daniel set up the chair with a metallic click. And miss out on all this quality father-daughter time? He winked at Emily. Besides, someone's got to make sure these chairs are lined up properly. Emily rolled her eyes. Only you would worry about perfect chair alignment at a school assembly. Students began filtering into the gym, their voices echoing off the high ceiling. The morning chatter grew louder as teenagers claimed seats in small clusters, sharing whispered conversations and occasional bursts of laughter. Daniel noticed Emily scanning the crowd, probably looking for her friends. Go on, he said, nudging her shoulder gently. I know you don't want to be seen hanging out with your old man. Thanks, Dad. She gave him a quick hug before disappearing into the growing crowd. Daniel continued setting up the remaining chairs, keeping one eye on the filling gymnasium. Principal Martinez stood at the podium, shuffling papers and testing the microphone with quiet taps. Teachers moved through the aisles, herding students into their seats with practiced patience. The assembly began like any other, with Principal Martinez clearing her throat into the microphone. Good morning, Lincoln High. Her voice carried across the now packed gymnasium as she began discussing upcoming events and achievements. Then it happened. A high-pitched scream cut through the principal's words, silencing the entire gym. Mommy, wake up! The cry came from a small boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, shaking the shoulder of a woman who had slumped forward in her chair. Daniel's training kicked in before he could think. He was moving through the crowd, pushing past stunned onlookers with careful but firm determination. Make way! Let me through! The woman lay crumpled in her chair, her dark hair falling across her face. Her son, tears streaming down his cheeks, continued pulling at her arm. Mommy, please wake up! Daniel knelt beside them, his voice steady and calm. Hey, buddy. I'm here to help your mom, okay? He looked at the boy's name tag. All visitors wore them for the assembly. Mateo, right? Can you be brave for your mom? Mateo nodded, his lower lip trembling. Daniel quickly assessed the situation, checking the woman's pulse and breathing. Her name tag read, Angela Ramirez. Her pulse was present but weak, her breathing shallow. Someone call 911, Daniel called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. He heard Principal Martinez already on her phone, relaying their location to emergency services. Daniel gently eased Angela from the chair onto the floor, careful to protect her head. He positioned her on her side in the recovery position, years of first aid training guiding his movements. The gym floor was hard, so he stripped off his jacket and folded it under her head. Island. Is my mommy going to be okay? Mateo's voice quivered. The boy had dropped to his knees beside them, his small hands clutching his mother's limp fingers. The doctors are coming to help her, Daniel assured him, keeping his voice steady and warm. I'm going to stay right here with both of you until they arrive. What grade are you in, Mateo? 4th, Mateo stammered, his eyes never leaving his mother's face. At Roosevelt Elementary. My daughter Emily used to go there, Daniel said, maintaining casual conversation while monitoring Angela's breathing. She loved Mrs. Peterson's class. Did you have her? This simple question seemed to give Mateo something to focus on besides his fear. Yeah, she's really nice. She gives us stickers when we do good on tests. Teachers had formed a protective circle around them, keeping other students at a respectful distance. Daniel could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. He kept checking Angela's pulse, relieved to find it remaining stable. Emily appeared at the edge of the teacher-formed barrier, concern etched on her face. Daniel gave her a reassuring nod, and she understood. Stay back, but stay close. The paramedics arrived with efficient speed, their equipment rattling as they rushed through the gym doors. Daniel provided them with what information he had, speaking in clear, concise terms that reflected his military background. As they transferred Angela onto a gurney, Matteo began to panic again. No, don't take her. He reached for his mother, but Daniel caught him gently. Hey, Matteo, look at me, Daniel said, kneeling to meet the boy's eyes. These people are going to take really good care of your mom. They're going to help her wake up. Matteo's small fingers gripped Daniel's sleeve, his dark eyes wide with fear. Please, don't let her die, he whispered, tears spilling down his cheeks. Daniel placed his hand over Matteo's, his heart aching for this frightened child. I promise I'll check on her, okay? Right now, we need to let the doctors help her. Principal Martinez stepped forward. I'll accompany Matteo to the hospital. We've already contacted his emergency numbers. But Matteo wouldn't let go of Daniel's sleeve, his knuckles white with desperation. The paramedics were almost ready to transport Angela, and time was crucial. Tell you what, Daniel said, meeting Matteo's gaze. I give you my word as a soldier that I'll make sure your mom is okay. Do you know what a soldier's word means? Matteo nodded slowly. It means you have to keep your promise. That's right, and I always keep my promises. Daniel carefully unwrapped Matteo's fingers from his sleeve, giving them a gentle squeeze before letting Principal Martinez guide him toward the exit. As the paramedics wheeled Angela away, Matteo walking alongside the gurney with the principal's hand on his shoulder, Daniel felt the weight of his promise settle around him. He hadn't expected this ordinary morning of setting up chairs to end with such a solemn vow, but something in that boy's desperate plea had touched a deep chord within him. The emergency room's automatic doors whooshed open as Daniel led Emily and Matteo inside. The harsh fluorescent lights made everyone look sickly, casting strange shadows across the crowded waiting room. Plastic chairs lined the walls, filled with people holding ice packs, coughing into masks, or just staring blankly ahead. Matteo's small hand trembled in Daniel's as they approached the front desk. The boy hadn't said a word during the car ride, his brown eyes wide with worry. Emily walked close beside them, carrying Matteo's blue backpack that someone had grabbed from the gym. Excuse me, Daniel said to the receptionist, his voice calm and steady from years of handling crisis situations. We're here for Angela Ramirez. She was brought in by ambulance from Lincoln High School. The receptionist typed on her keyboard, her long nails clicking against the keys. Are you family? No, but I was there when she collapsed. Her son is with me. Daniel gestured to Matteo, who pressed closer against his leg. Fill these out as best you can, she said, sliding some forms across the counter. The doctor will update us when possible. They found 3 empty chairs in the corner. Matteo sat between Daniel and Emily, his legs swinging anxiously above the floor. The boy's shoulders shook with silent tears. Hey, buddy, Daniel said softly, placing a gentle hand on Matteo's back. Your mom is getting the best care possible. These doctors are really good at their jobs. Matteo sniffled and wiped his nose with his sleeve. But what if she doesn't wake up? Like your wife didn't wake up. Daniel's chest tightened. Emily reached over and squeezed his arm, understanding in her eyes. She knew how rarely he spoke about her mother. That was different, Daniel explained carefully. Your mom just needs rest and medicine. Tell you what. How about some hot chocolate while we wait? The cafeteria here makes pretty good ones. Matteo nodded slightly, and Daniel stood up. Emily, would you like one too? Yes, please, she said, already pulling out her phone to show Matteo some funny cat videos, her go-to method for cheering people up. The cafeteria was nearly empty. While waiting for the drinks, Daniel watched through the doorway as Emily made Matteo smile for the first time since his mother collapsed. His daughter had grown so wise and caring, stepping up to help others just like her mother always had. When he returned with 3 steaming cups, Matteo wrapped his small hands around the warm paper cup. Thank you, he whispered, taking careful sips. Your mom is very strong, Daniel said, settling back into his chair. Sometimes strong people work too hard, and their bodies tell them to slow down. That's probably what happened today. She works 3 jobs, Mateo said quietly. She's always tired, but she says we need the money for rent and my school stuff. His voice cracked. It's my fault she works so much. No, Emily interjected firmly. It's not your fault at all. Parents work hard because they love their kids, not because they have to. Daniel nodded, proud of Emily's insight. Your mom loves you very much. That's why she works so hard. But sometimes everyone needs help, and that's okay. A doctor in light blue scrubs appeared in the waiting room. Family of Angela Ramirez? Daniel stood up with Mateo, who clutched his hand tightly. The doctor led them to a quieter corner of the waiting room. I'm Dr. Chen, she said, crouching down to Mateo's eye level. Your mom is going to be okay. She fainted because she's very tired and her body needs more iron. That's something in your blood that helps carry oxygen around. She's also very stressed, which means her body and mind need rest. Mateo's grip on Daniel's hand loosened slightly. Can I see her? Soon, doctor, Chen promised. We're giving her medicine through an IV. That's like a little straw that puts medicine right into her blood. She needs to stay overnight for observation, but she's awake now. Thank you, doctor, Daniel said. Is there anything else we should know? Dr. Chen stood up, her expression serious. Miss Ramirez needs to reduce her workload and stress levels. Her blood pressure is concerning, and she shows signs of chronic exhaustion. Has she been seeing a regular doctor? Daniel glanced at Mateo, who was distracted by Emily showing him something on her phone again. I'm not sure, he said quietly. We're not family. I was just there when she collapsed. The doctor nodded understanding. Well, she's lucky you were there. We'll discuss follow-up care with her directly. As the evening wore on, Mateo curled up in his chair, his head resting against Daniel's arm. Emily had given him her jacket as a makeshift blanket, and he'd finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. Dad, Emily said softly, we can't just leave them. They need help. Daniel looked at his daughter's determined face, so much like her mother's, when she'd made up her mind about something important. Before he could respond, a nurse appeared. Miss Ramirez can have visitors now, but visiting hours end in 15 minutes. Daniel gently woke Mateo, who stumbled sleepily down the hallway between them. Angela lay in a hospital bed, looking small against the white sheets. An IV dripped steadily beside her, and a blood pressure cuff was wrapped around her arm. Mommy. Mateo rushed forward, stopping just short of the bed. Mi amor, Angela said weakly, reaching for him. I'm sorry I scared you. It's okay, Mama. Mr. Carter got me hot chocolate, and Emily showed me funny videos, and the doctor said you're going to be okay. Angela's eyes met Daniel's over her son's head. Her face was pale, but her gaze was steady and grateful. She reached out her free hand, and Daniel stepped forward to take it. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For taking care of my boy. For everything. Of course, Daniel said simply. We'll be back tomorrow if that's okay. Angela nodded, her eyes filling with tears. You don't have to. We want to, Emily interrupted firmly. Right, Dad? Right, Daniel agreed. You rest now. We'll see you tomorrow. Morning sunlight streamed through the hospital's glass doors as Daniel stepped inside. A small bouquet of cheerful yellow daisies in one hand, and a superhero coloring book tucked under his arm. The lobby was quieter now compared to last night's chaos, with only the soft murmur of voices and the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. He'd dropped Emily off at school earlier, her words still echoing in his mind. Tell Mateo, I saved him the seat next to me at lunch. His daughter's instant compassion for the young boy touched something deep inside him. The elevator dinged at the 3rd floor, and Daniel made his way down the familiar corridor to room 312. He knocked gently on the door frame, finding Angela propped up in bed, looking tired but better than yesterday. Mateo sat cross-legged on a chair nearby, pushing a toy car back and forth on the window ledge. Mr. Carter, Mateo's face lit up as he scrambled down from his perch. You came back? I promised, didn't I? Daniel smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. He turned to Angela. These are for you. Nothing fancy, Just thought they might brighten up the room a bit." Angela's eyes softened as she accepted the flowers. "You didn't have to do that. You've already done so much. And this," Daniel held out the coloring book to Mateo, "is for you, buddy. Emily helped pick it out. She said you might like superheroes." Mateo hugged the book to his chest, eyes wide. "I love Spider-Man. Look, Mama." "What do we say, Maijo?" Angela reminded gently. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." Mateo immediately settled on the floor, pulling crayons from his backpack. Daniel pulled up a chair beside Angela's bed. Now that the initial crisis had passed, he could see the deep exhaustion etched in her face, the worry lines around her eyes that seemed too pronounced for someone her age. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Angela's fingers twisted in the thin hospital blanket. "Better. The doctors want to keep me another day for observation." She glanced at Mateo, lowering her voice. "I can't afford another day here, but they're insisting." "What happened? If you don't mind me asking." She was quiet for a moment, watching Mateo color. "I've been working 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and cashiering at Morton's Market during the day." "The market." She hesitated. "It's not a good place. The manager, he gives all the better shifts to other workers. Makes comments about my accent. When I asked for time off for Mateo's parent-teacher conference, he cut my hours." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's discrimination. It's illegal." "It is," Angela agreed softly. "But proving it? Filing complaints? I can't risk losing either job. Mateo needs stability, food on the table, a roof over his head." She brushed away a tear with the back of her hand. "I've been skipping meals, taking extra shifts. The doctor says I'm severely anemic. Should have been treating it months ago, but medical care." She shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes. "Let me help," Daniel said, leaning forward. "I know some people, lawyers, who could look into the situation at Morton's, and there are programs, assistants." "No." Angela's voice was firm, though her eyes were kind. "I appreciate it, but I can't accept charity. We'll manage. We always have." "Mama, look." Mateo scrambled up, proudly displaying a crayon drawing. "It's us, see? That's you, and that's me, and that's Mr. Carter. We're holding hands." Daniel's breath caught as he looked at the childish figures. A tall man in what appeared to be his army jacket. How had Mateo noticed that detail from yesterday? Holding hands with a smaller woman and child. The sun smiled down on them from the corner of the paper, and Mateo had written, "My family," across the top in wobbly letters. Angela's eyes welled up as she took the drawing. "It's beautiful, mi amor." "Can we put it on the wall?" Mateo asked eagerly. "Next to the flowers?" Daniel helped him tape the drawing to the wall, something tight and warm squeezing in his chest as he looked at those 3 linked figures. It had been so long since anyone but Emily had needed him, trusted him. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Time for your medications, Mrs. Ramirez." Daniel checked his watch. "I should head out. Is there anything you need? I could bring lunch later." Angela shook her head. "You've done more than enough." "Thank you, truly." Mateo followed him to the door, small fingers catching the edge of Daniel's jacket. "You're coming back, right?" His voice trembled slightly. "You saved my mommy. Please don't leave us." Daniel knelt down to Mateo's level, those words hitting him like a physical weight. The boy's eyes were wide and pleading, filled with a hope that made Daniel's throat tight. He'd seen that same look in Emily's eyes after her mother died, that desperate need for someone strong to hold on to, someone who wouldn't disappear. The words, "We'll be fine," died on his tongue as he looked at Mateo's anxious face. Instead, he found himself saying, "I'll be back this afternoon, buddy. I promise." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hospital parking lot as Daniel helped Angela into his SUV. Her steps were still shaky, and she clutched her discharge papers like a lifeline. In the back seat, Mateo bounced excitedly, telling Emily about his collection of toy cars at home. "You really don't have to do this," Angela said softly, smoothing her wrinkled blouse. "We could have taken the bus." Daniel shook his head as he started the engine. "No way." Doctor's orders were clear about rest. He glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Emily's encouraging smile. The drive to Angela's apartment complex took them through a less affluent part of town. Paint peeled from the buildings and chain-link fences bordered cracked sidewalks. Angela directed him to park near a 3-story walk-up with faded brick walls. "Third floor," she said apologetically, reaching for her purse. "I've got your bag," Daniel insisted, grabbing the small duffel of hospital things. Emily took Mateo's hand as they climbed the stairs, the boy pointing out drawings taped to neighbors' doors. Angela's hands trembled slightly as she unlocked her apartment door. The space inside was small but meticulously clean, with worn but well-cared-for furniture. Bright curtains and children's artwork brought warmth to the modest rooms. But Daniel's eyes caught the stack of papers on the kitchen counter. Bills and past-due notices forming a precarious tower. "Welcome to our home," Angela said, her voice carrying a hint of both pride and embarrassment. Mateo tugged Emily toward his room. "Want to see my cars? I have 23. As the kids disappeared down the short hallway, Daniel noticed the steady drip from the kitchen faucet. Angela followed his gaze. "Oh, that's been acting up for weeks. The super keeps saying he'll fix it, but—" She shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes about unanswered maintenance requests. "Mind if I take a look?" Daniel asked, already rolling up his sleeves. "I'm pretty handy with basic repairs." Angela hesitated. "You've already done so much." "It's no trouble," he said, opening the cabinet under the sink. "Besides, that drip is probably hiking up your water bill." While Daniel worked on the sink, Angela sorted through her mail with shaking hands. He couldn't help but notice her sharp intake of breath at one envelope. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice muffled as he tightened a connection. "My supervisor," she said quietly. "He's not happy about my absence. Says I should have given proper notice before deciding to collapse." Her bitter laugh held no humor. 3 years I've worked there, never called in sick, covered everyone else's shifts, and now—" Daniel slid out from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's discrimination, plain and simple." "It's reality," Angela corrected, sinking into a kitchen chair. "Single mother Latina, no degree, we're easy to replace. I can't afford to fight it, especially not now." Her eyes drifted to the medical bills among the stack. From Mateo's room came peals of laughter, as Emily apparently did something funny. The sound seemed to both lift and burden Angela's spirits. "Let me make dinner," Daniel offered, testing the now-fixed faucet. "You should be resting anyway." "Daniel, please," Angela protested. "You don't have to—" "I want to," he said firmly. "Besides, Emily loves helping in the kitchen." "Kids," he called out. "Who wants to help make spaghetti?" Soon the small kitchen was filled with activity. Emily helped boil pasta while Daniel prepared a simple sauce. Mateo set the table, proudly showing his mother how he remembered the proper placement of forks and spoons from school. Angela watched from her chair, her protests gradually giving way to grateful smiles. As they ate, Mateo chatted about school, mouth half full of pasta. "Miss Thompson says I'm getting better at math. Emily helped me understand fractions today. He's really smart," Emily added. "He just needed someone to explain it differently." Angela's eyes grew misty. "Thank you, Emily. Mateo struggles sometimes, and I wish I could help more. But after working both jobs—" She trailed off, pushing pasta around her plate. "Maybe we could study together more often," Emily suggested, looking at her father hopefully. Daniel nodded. "That's a great idea, Em. Angela, if you're comfortable with it, Emily and I could pick up Mateo after school sometimes, help with homework until you're done with work." "I couldn't ask that of you," Angela whispered, but her eyes betrayed how much she wanted to accept. "You're not asking, we're offering," Daniel said gently. After dinner, while the kids returned to Mateo's room to finish homework, Angela's brave facade cracked slightly. "I'm terrified," she admitted, voice barely audible. "One missed paycheck, one more emergency. That's all it would take. Mateo deserves so much better than this uncertainty." Daniel watched her hands twist nervously in her lap, remembering how his late wife used to do the same when worried. The memory, surprisingly, didn't bring its usual sharp pain. Instead, it fueled his desire to help. Later that evening, after helping clean up and ensuring Angela had everything she needed, Daniel and Emily headed home. The drive was quiet until they pulled into their driveway. Emily turned to him as he killed the engine. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Why can't we just help them more?" Her young face was serious in the dashboard lights, showing wisdom beyond her 14 years. Daniel sat back in his seat, his daughter's simple question weighing heavily in his chest. The answer wasn't simple at all. It involved pride, boundaries, and complicated adult realities. But looking at Emily's earnest expression, he knew she saw something adults sometimes forgot. Sometimes helping others was just that simple. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when Daniel pulled up to Angela's apartment complex. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, early as usual from his military days. A flicker of movement caught his eye as Angela emerged from her building, her black uniform pressed despite its obvious wear. She paused when she saw his car, her shoulders tensing before relaxing in recognition. "You didn't have to come," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. Her voice was soft but carried a hint of embarrassment. Daniel shifted the car into drive. "I wanted to make sure you got there okay. First day, back and all." The streets were quiet as they drove, only a few early commuters sharing the road. Angela sat with her hands folded in her lap, occasionally fidgeting with the edge of her name tag. The silence between them felt comfortable, like a shared understanding. "Mateo was so excited to go back to school today," Angela said, breaking the quiet. "He wouldn't stop talking about showing Emily his science project." Daniel smiled. "Emily mentioned something about helping him with it yesterday." They pulled into the parking lot of the Golden Corner Diner, a weathered building with faded yellow trim. Through the large windows, Daniel could see the morning crew setting up, flipping chairs off tables and filling coffee makers. "I can pick you up after your shift," Daniel offered. Angela shook her head. "You've already done too much. I can take the bus." Before Daniel could protest, a sharp rap on the passenger window made them both jump. A heavy-set man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl stood there, his manager's badge glinting in the morning light. "You're late, Ramirez," he barked as Angela hurried out of the car. "I'm 10 minutes early, Mr. Peterson," Angela replied quietly, checking her watch. Daniel stepped out of his car, something protective stirring in his chest as he watched the interaction. Well, Peterson sneered, looking between them. "I see you found yourself a fancy ride. Must be nice taking a vacation whenever you feel like it." Angela's cheeks flushed. "I was in the hospital, sir. I brought the doctor's note." "Save it." Peterson cut her off, his voice carrying across the parking lot where other employees were arriving. "You people always have excuses. My sister's cousin's neighbor is Mexican, and she never misses work." Daniel's jaw clenched. The casual racism in Peterson's tone made his blood boil, but he noticed how Angela seemed to shrink into herself, as if trying to become invisible. "Now, get inside and start your shift," Peterson continued. "And try not to faint again. It's bad for business having you people causing scenes." Other workers hurried past, heads down, pretending not to notice. Some shot sympathetic glances at Angela, but no one spoke up. "Excuse me?" Daniel stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of his military years. "I don't appreciate—" Angela touched his arm, her fingers trembling slightly. "It's okay," she whispered. "Please. I need this job." Daniel forced himself to stay rooted to the spot as Angela followed Peterson inside. Through the window, he watched as the manager continued berating her, pointing aggressively at various tasks while other employees scurried around them. Unable to leave, Daniel found a booth near the window and ordered coffee. For the next hour, he observed as Angela worked tirelessly, serving customers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Peterson seemed to take special pleasure in criticizing her every move, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Table 6 is still waiting for their refills, Ramirez. What's the matter? Can't you understand English? That's not how we stack plates here. Did they not teach you proper cleaning in your country?" Each comment made Daniel's hand tighten around his coffee cup. He watched Angela absorb every insult with quiet dignity, though he could see the toll it was taking in the slight tremor of her hands and the increasing stiffness of her movements. When Peterson made Angela re-clean an already spotless table for the third time, Daniel had seen enough. He left money for his coffee and waited in his car, texting Emily that he'd be a little late picking her up from school. 3 hours later, Angela emerged from the diner, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She stopped short when she saw Daniel's car still there. "You waited?" she asked, sliding into the passenger seat. Her voice cracked slightly. "Couldn't leave. Knowing you'd take the bus," Daniel replied gently, pulling out of the parking lot. They drove in silence for several blocks, the tension from the morning hanging heavy between them. At a red light, Daniel heard a small sniff. He glanced over to see tears rolling down Angela's cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, quickly wiping her face. "It's just. Some days are harder than others." "You have nothing to apologize for," Daniel said firmly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible," Angela continued, her voice barely audible. "Like I'm not even a person to them, just some problem they have to deal with." Her hands twisted in her lap. "I keep telling myself to be strong for Mateo, but days like this." She trailed off, more tears falling. Daniel pulled the car over to a quiet side street and turned to face her. The morning sun highlighted the exhaustion in her face, the weight of years of similar treatment evident in her eyes. "Not anymore," he said softly but with conviction. "You're not invisible, Angela. Not to me, not to Emily, and certainly not to Mateo. What happened in there?" He gestured back toward the diner. "That's not okay, and you don't have to face it alone anymore." The aroma of lasagna filled Daniel's modest 2-story home as Emily arranged plates on the dining room table. She had insisted on using the fancy dishes, the ones with tiny blue flowers around the edges that her mother had loved. Daniel watched his daughter fuss over every detail, straightening forks and adjusting napkins with unusual care. "Dad, do you think they'll like it?" Emily asked, stepping back to survey her work. "I mean, the table looks okay, right?" Daniel smiled, noting how his normally confident teenager suddenly seemed nervous. "It looks perfect, honey. You've done a great job." The doorbell chimed, and Emily practically bounced to the door. Angela stood there with Mateo, holding a covered dish. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore a simple blue dress that made her look younger, less weighted down by worry. "We brought flan," Mateo announced proudly. "Mama made it special." Come in," Daniel gestured warmly. "Something tells me Emily won't let that flan go to waste." The kitchen filled with comfortable chatter as Angela insisted on helping Emily with the final dinner preparations. Daniel showed Mateo around the living room, answering the boy's eager questions about everything he saw. "What's that picture?" Mateo pointed to a framed photo of Daniel in his army uniform. "That's from when I was a soldier," Daniel explained, leading Mateo to a small display shelf. Several medals gleamed behind glass. "These are from my time serving our country." Mateo's eyes widened. "You're a real hero?" He pressed his nose against the glass. "Like in the movies?" Daniel chuckled. "Not exactly. I just did my job, helping people who needed it." "Dinner's ready," Emily called from the dining room. They gathered around the table, passing dishes and filling plates. The lasagna steam curled up invitingly, and Angela's eyes sparkled as she took her first bite. "This is incredible," she said. "Did you make this, Emily?" Emily beamed. "Dad helped. He's teaching me all Mom's old recipes." A comfortable silence fell as they ate, broken by Mateo's excited commentary about his day at school and Emily's patient responses to his questions. Daniel noticed how Angela seemed to relax more with each passing minute, the tension in her shoulders gradually easing. After dinner, they moved to the living room with cups of coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for the kids. Mateo returned to the medal display, this time with Angela in tow. "These are impressive," Angela said softly, studying the awards. "You must have seen a lot of difficult things." Daniel nodded. "The hardest part was always seeing people who needed help and not being able to do enough." Angela's fingers traced the glass. "I understand that feeling. She hesitated, then continued in a quieter voice. "I wanted to be a nurse, you know. Had 2 years of school finished when my parents got sick. Had to drop out to work and take care of them." She smiled sadly. "Sometimes I still dream about it, helping people, making a difference." You do make a difference, Daniel said firmly. Every day, with Mateo, with everyone you meet. Mama helps everyone, Mateo piped up from where he and Emily sat, looking through a photo album. She's the best mama ever. He jumped up and ran to Daniel, throwing his arms around him in an impulsive hug. And you're the best too. I wish you were my dad. The room fell silent. Emily froze mid-page turn. Angela's face flushed deep red. Mateo, Angela said sharply, then softened her tone. I'm so sorry, Daniel. He doesn't. It's okay, Daniel said quickly, giving Mateo a gentle squeeze before releasing him. He's just being honest. That's a good thing. Mateo looked between the adults, suddenly uncertain. Did I say something bad? No, Majo, Angela assured him, pulling him close. You just surprised us, that's all. Emily, showing wisdom beyond her years, stood up. Hey Mateo, want to see my science project? I'm growing crystals in my room. As the kids thundered up the stairs, Angela covered her face with her hands. I'm mortified. He gets attached so easily, and you've been so kind to us. Angela. Daniel waited until she looked at him. There's nothing to apologize for. Mateo is a wonderful boy, and his trust. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It means a lot to me. They shared a long look, something unspoken passing between them. The moment broke when the kids called down, asking permission to start another crystal experiment. The evening wound down naturally after that. Angela and Mateo gathered their things, with promises to return the favor with dinner at their place soon. At the door, Mateo hugged both Daniel and Emily, while Angela thanked them softly. Later that night, Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Mateo's words echoed in his mind. I wish you were my dad. He thought about Angela's dream of nursing, cut short by circumstance. He thought about her manager's sneering face, the stack of bills on her counter, the way she pressed on despite everything. Rolling onto his side, Daniel knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Not with the weight of decision pressing on him. He couldn't just stand by anymore, couldn't just offer occasional help and hope things worked out. Angela and Mateo's fight had become his fight too, whether he'd planned it or not. The moonlight filtered through his window, casting shadows on the wall. In the quiet, Daniel remembered his commanding officer's words from years ago. Sometimes the battles that matter most aren't the ones we choose, they're the ones that choose us. The spring morning sparkled with promise as Daniel's pickup truck pulled into Riverside Park. Mateo pressed his face against the window, his eyes wide at the sight of the sprawling playground and soccer field stretched out before them. Can we play on the swings first? Mateo bounced in his seat, his energy infectious. In the rearview mirror, Daniel caught Emily, hiding a smile behind her hand. Let's get your mom settled first, buddy. Daniel glanced at Angela in the passenger seat. She looked better after a week of proper rest, but shadows still lingered under her eyes. The morning sun caught the silver threading through her dark hair, reminding him how much she'd aged beyond her years from stress and worry. They found a quiet spot near the playground, where Angela could sit on a wooden bench beneath a spreading maple tree. Daniel pulled out a folding chair he'd brought along and set it up next to her, then spread a checkered blanket on the grass for their picnic later. You didn't have to do all this, Angela said softly, but her grateful smile told a different story. Mom, can I go play? Mateo was already bouncing on his toes, eyeing the playground equipment. Hey, Mateo, Emily called out, pulling a soccer ball from her backpack. Want me to teach you some moves? I'm on the school team. Mateo's face lit up. He looked to his mother for permission, and at her nod, he raced off with Emily toward the open field. Daniel watched as Emily showed Mateo how to dribble, her patience obvious as she demonstrated the technique again and again. Your daughter, Angela said. She's something special. Daniel nodded, pride warming his chest. She's got her mother's heart. Sarah was a natural teacher too. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the kids play. The morning was perfect, not too hot, with just enough breeze to rustle the maple leaves overhead. Other families dotted the park, their laughter and chatter creating a peaceful backdrop. Angela, Daniel began carefully, turning to face her. I've been thinking about how we can make things easier for you and Mateo. She stiffened slightly, that familiar pride rising in her expression. Daniel, you've already done so much. Just hear me out? He kept his voice gentle. Emily and I live 10 minutes from your apartment. We're already heading to the same school every day. Let me give you and Mateo rides. It'll save you bus fare and cut your commute time in half. Angela twisted her hands in her lap. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Daniel leaned back, trying to make the conversation feel less intense. And Emily's already volunteered to help Mateo with his homework. She says it'll look good on her college applications, teaching experience, and all that. That drew a small laugh from Angela. In the field, Mateo had managed to kick the ball past Emily, and his victory whoop echoed across the park. Both parents smiled at his joy. There's more, Daniel continued. I love to cook, but cooking for two means endless leftovers. If you and Mateo joined us for dinner a few times a week, he shrugged, it would help me out too. Angela was quiet for a long moment, watching her son chase the soccer ball. Why are you doing all this? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel thought carefully before answering. Because everyone needs a helping hand sometimes. When Sarah died, our neighbors practically moved in, cooking, cleaning, driving Emily to school. I didn't want the help either, but accepting it saved us. He saw tears gather in Angela's eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. A child's shriek of laughter from the playground made them both look up, but it was someone else's kid. It's hard, Angela admitted. Being everything for him? Working so much I barely see him. Living in constant fear that one missed shift or one medical bill will. She trailed off, shaking her head. You don't have to do it alone anymore. Daniel kept his voice steady. Matter of fact, let us help. Not because you're weak, you're the strongest person I know, but because you and Mateo deserve some peace, some safety. On the field, Emily was showing Mateo how to do a proper throw-in. His first attempt sent the ball rolling sideways, but Emily's encouraging cheer made him try again. Angela watched them for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Okay, she said softly. The rides would help. And maybe dinner? Once or twice a week? We'll start there. Daniel smiled, relief flooding through him. Though fair warning, Emily's going to try to convince you to let Mateo stay for movie nights too. She's already planning a Marvel marathon. That earned him a real laugh from Angela, the sound bright and beautiful in the morning air. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, until it was time to spread out their picnic lunch. As they gathered their things later, the kids ran ahead to the parking lot, Emily and Mateo arguing playfully about which superhero was the best. Angela paused, touching Daniel's arm lightly. I don't remember the last time I felt safe, she whispered, her eyes meeting his for a brief, vulnerable moment before she looked away. Daniel understood the weight of that admission, the trust it represented. He let the words settle between them, a quiet acknowledgement of something shifting, something healing, in both their lives. Daniel's kitchen table disappeared under a scatter of colored paper, markers, and history books. Mateo sat cross-legged on his chair, his tongue poking out in concentration as he carefully glued another picture to their poster board. Emily leaned over his shoulder, pointing to where the image should go. That's perfect, Mateo, Emily said, ruffling his hair. The timeline looks so much better with pictures. Daniel watched them from the counter where he was arranging a plate of apple slices and cheese. His heart warmed at how naturally Emily had taken Mateo under her wing. The boy had blossomed under her attention, his usual shyness giving way to eager questions and bright smiles. Mr. Carter, Mateo called out, did you fight in wars like these soldiers? He pointed to a black and white photo of World War II veterans they'd printed for their project. Different time, different war, buddy, Daniel replied, setting the snack plate between the kids. But yeah, I served overseas. Emily rolled her eyes. Dad never talks about it though. He's super humble. The front doorbell chimed, and Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew who it was without looking. Come in, he called out. Angela stepped inside, still wearing her blue diner uniform. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her smile lit up her tired face. Sorry I'm late, she said, slipping off her worn sneakers. The dinner rush was crazy today. Mommy! Mateo jumped up, scattering markers. He wrapped his arms around her waist. "Careful there, my Joe," she laughed, hugging him back. "I'm all greasy from work." Daniel pulled out a chair for her. "Sit, rest. We've got everything under control here." Angela sank into the seat with a grateful sigh. "It looks amazing, kids." She studied their half-finished timeline of American wars. "You've been busy," Emily beamed. "Mateo's really good at organizing everything. We're going to get an A for sure." "Only because you helped me so much," Mateo said, offering Angela an apple slice. Daniel brought Angela a glass of iced tea, the way she liked it. No sugar, extra lemon. She accepted it with a soft, "Thank you," their fingers brushing. The simple contact sent warmth through his hand. "Tell them about the crazy customer today, Mommy," Mateo said, climbing back into his chair. Angela chuckled, shaking her head. "Oh no, it's not that interesting." "Please?" Emily joined in, wielding the power of her best puppy dog eyes. "Well?" Angela took a sip of tea. "This lady ordered our signature banana cream pie, ate the whole thing, then tried to convince me she'd ordered apple pie instead and demanded a refund." The kids dissolved into giggles. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching Angela's animated gestures as she continued the story. The kitchen light caught the silver threads in her dark hair, and the way she talked with her hands reminded him of his late wife. But the thought didn't bring the usual stab of pain. Instead, it felt right, like his past and present were finally finding peace with each other. "And then," Angela continued, "she pulled out her phone to show me a picture of the apple pie she claimed to order. Except it was clearly our banana cream pie in the photo." More laughter filled the kitchen. Daniel found himself chuckling too, caught up in the warmth of the moment. This was what his house had been missing. The sound of shared joy, the feeling of belonging that came from having people to care about. They worked on the project together, Angela helping with dates while Daniel shared what he knew about military history. The kids soaked it all in, adding colorful details to their timeline. Time slipped by unnoticed, until Angela glanced at her watch and gasped. "Oh no, it's getting late. Mateo, we should go. You have school tomorrow." "5 more minutes?" Mateo pleaded. But a yawn betrayed him. Emily started gathering the art supplies. "We can finish tomorrow after school, right, Dad?" Daniel nodded. "Of course. You're both always welcome here." Angela helped Mateo into his jacket, then turned to Daniel. "Thank you for watching him. For everything, really." Her voice was soft, meant just for him. "It's no trouble," Daniel said. "He's a great kid, and Emily loves having him around." They stood at the door, neither quite ready to say goodbye. The porch light cast a gentle glow on Angela's face, softening the lines of worry that usually creased her forehead. She looked younger, more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "We'll see you tomorrow then?" she asked, adjusting her purse strap. "Count on it," Daniel replied. He watched as Angela and Mateo walked down the driveway to their car, Mateo chattering about their project the whole way. The boy waved enthusiastically from the passenger window, and Angela gave one last smile before pulling away. Daniel stood in the doorway long after their taillights had disappeared, his heart full of unexpected emotions. The evening replayed in his mind. Angela's laugh, the way she listened intently to both children, how natural it felt to have her in his kitchen. Something was changing inside him, something both thrilling and terrifying. With a start, he realized he was falling for her. The thought should have sent him running for cover, but instead it settled in his chest like a warm ember, glowing with possibility. "Dad?" Emily's voice broke into his thoughts. "Are you okay? You're just standing there." Daniel turned to his daughter, seeing knowing wisdom in her teenage eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm okay. I'm really okay." The Lincoln High School cafeteria buzzed with the usual Wednesday night PTA meeting chatter. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the rows of parents seated at long tables, their coffee cups and notepads scattered about. Daniel shifted in his uncomfortable plastic chair, his attention caught by the ongoing discussion about the crumbling gymnasium floor. "We're looking at least $15,000 for basic repairs," Mrs. Peterson, the PTA president, announced, pushing her wire-rimmed glasses up her nose. "The fundraising committee suggests another bake sale and perhaps a car wash in spring." Daniel glanced around the room, noting the tired faces of working parents who'd rushed here after long days. His thoughts drifted to Angela, who couldn't attend because of her evening shift at the diner. The same diner where her manager had humiliated her just days ago. He raised his hand, surprising himself. "What if we thought bigger?" Mrs. Peterson nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Carter." Standing up, Daniel cleared his throat. "The gym floor needs fixing, yes, but we have families in our school community who need help too. What if we expanded our fundraising goals?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. "There are kids here whose parents skip meals to pay for school supplies. Single parents working multiple jobs who can't afford basic health care." He didn't mention Angela by name, but his heart pounded thinking of her. "That's not really the PTA's purpose," someone called out, "isn't it?" Daniel turned to face the voice. "We're here to support our school community. That means all of it. Every child, every family." Sarah Chen, who ran the local bakery, stood up. "He's right. My daughter told me about what happened at the assembly last week. That poor mother who collapsed. She works at Joe's Diner, doesn't she?" Daniel nodded, careful with his words. "Angela Ramirez. She's raising her son Mateo alone, working 2 jobs. She couldn't afford proper medical care, and it nearly cost her everything." The room grew quiet. Mrs. Peterson leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Carter?" "A community fair," Daniel said, the idea forming as he spoke. "Bigger than a bake sale. We get local businesses involved. Make it a real event. Half the proceeds go to gym repairs, half to a family assistance fund." More hands shot up. Ideas began flowing. The owner of the hardware store offered to donate supplies for game booths. A local band volunteered to perform. Sarah Chen promised to bring her famous cakes. "We could have a silent auction," Emily's English teacher suggested. "I know several artists who might donate pieces." The energy in the room had shifted completely. Daniel watched in amazement as his simple suggestion transformed into a full-scale community event. Parents pulled out phones, making calls and sending texts. Someone started a planning committee sign-up sheet. Later that evening, Daniel drove to Joe's Diner. Angela was wiping down tables, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up when the bell chimed, her tired face brightening at the sight of him. "Daniel? Is everything okay? Is Mateo?" "Mateo's fine. He's at my place with Emily, working on their project. I needed to talk to you about something." They sat in a quiet booth. Daniel watched Angela's expressions shift from confusion to disbelief to embarrassment as he explained about the PTA meeting. "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "I can't accept charity. I won't." "It's not charity," Daniel said gently. "It's community. Remember when the Hendersons lost their house in that fire last year? Everyone pitched in. That's what neighbors do." Angela stared down at her hands. That was different. "Why? Because they're not single? Not Hispanic? Not because I should be able to take care of myself?" Her voice cracked. "I'm supposed to be strong enough." Daniel reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "You are strong. Stronger than anyone I know. But being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone." A tear slid down Angela's cheek. She quickly wiped it away with her free hand. "What will people think?" "They'll think you're part of this community. That your son deserves the same chances as every other kid. That sometimes we all need help." He squeezed her hand. "Let people care, Angela. Let them show you you're not alone." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers trembling slightly under his. Finally, she looked up, her eyes shining. "Maybe God sent you at the right time." The Lincoln High School gymnasium had transformed overnight. Gone were the scuff marks and squeaking floorboards that usually dominated the space. Instead, rainbow-colored streamers danced from the ceiling, and carefully arranged tables lined the walls, their surfaces laden with homemade treats and crafts. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, casting warm patches of light across the freshly swept floor. Angela stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly together. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton number she saved for special occasions, but her shoulders were tense with anxiety. Mateo tugged at her sleeve. pointing excitedly at the growing crowd of familiar faces. "Look, Mommy! Miss Rodriguez brought her famous churros!" Mateo's eyes sparkled with delight. Daniel appeared beside them, looking sharp in a pressed, button-down shirt. "Ready?" he asked softly, noting Angela's hesitation. "I don't know about this," Angela whispered, watching more parents and teachers file in. "It feels like too much." "Hey!" Daniel touched her elbow gently. "This isn't charity. This is community." Emily bounced over, her ponytail swinging. "Mrs. Peterson says people are already buying raffle tickets like crazy. Come see the prize table." The gymnasium filled quickly with warmth and laughter. Teachers manned the bake sale tables, calling out descriptions of treats in cheerful voices. Students darted between groups, carrying plates of cookies and brownies. Parents clustered around display boards, showing local business donations, writing checks and dropping bills into collection boxes. Angela's co-workers from the diner had shown up in force, each bringing something for the bake sale. Even her usually stern manager had contributed, surprising everyone with perfectly frosted cupcakes. The sight of their support brought tears to her eyes. "These are amazing, Mrs. Ramirez," Principal Matthews exclaimed, sampling one of Angela's empanadas. "You should open your own restaurant." A steady stream of people approached Angela, sharing kind words and gentle hugs. Many had stories about times she'd helped them, staying late at the diner to serve a tired trucker, offering extra portions to struggling families, always having a warm smile ready despite her exhaustion. Daniel watched from nearby, his heart swelling as he saw the community embrace Angela and Mateo. His veteran friends had shown up too, some in uniform, adding a touch of ceremony to the occasion. They'd set up their own table, collecting additional donations from their network. The morning wore on, and the energy in the room only grew. Children played games in one corner, while parents bid on silent auction items in another. The school band performed popular songs, their slightly off-key renditions adding charm to the atmosphere. Near noon, Principal Matthews clinked a glass for attention. "If I could have everyone's attention, please. Mr. Carter would like to say a few words." Daniel hadn't planned to speak, but seeing Angela's face light up throughout the morning had inspired him. He stepped to the middle of the room, suddenly aware of all eyes on him. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice steady and warm. "You know, when I first moved here with Emily after leaving the service, I wasn't sure we'd find a place to belong. But this community proved me wrong." He paused, looking at Angela and Mateo. "A few weeks ago, I witnessed something that reminded me why community matters. I saw a mother who works harder than anyone I know collapse from exhaustion. But what I've seen since then has been even more remarkable." The room fell silent, hanging on his words. "I've seen a woman who, despite facing discrimination and hardship, never loses her grace or kindness. I've seen her son, who shows more courage and love than many adults I know. And now, I'm seeing all of you, coming together to support them, not because you have to, but because you choose to. That's what real community looks like." Angela wiped tears from her cheeks as Daniel continued. "In the military we talk about having each other's backs. That's what you're all doing today. You're showing that when one of us struggles, we all step up. That's not charity. That's family." Applause erupted, echoing off the gymnasium walls. Mrs. Peterson hurried forward with a calculator in hand, her eyes wide with excitement. She whispered something to Principal Matthews, who beamed and nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen," the principal announced, "thanks to your incredible generosity, we've not only met our initial goal, we've doubled it." The room erupted in cheers. Mateo jumped up and down, pulling at Emily's hands. The two children had become inseparable over the past weeks, and their joy was infectious. Angela stepped forward, overwhelmed by emotion. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around Daniel in a tight hug. The crowd's cheers grew louder, but Daniel barely noticed. He was focused on Angela's whispered words in his ear. "You've given us hope." She pulled back slightly, her eyes shining with tears of joy. The morning light caught her face, and Daniel saw not just gratitude there, but something deeper, a spark of possibility, of future brightness that hadn't been there before. Around them, the fundraiser continued in full swing. More people lined up at the bake sale tables, Children chased each other through the streamers, and the band struck up another tune. But for that moment, Daniel and Angela stood in their own quiet bubble of understanding, surrounded by the warmth of a community that had come together to show what real love and support looked like. The spirit of generosity filled every corner of the gymnasium, proving that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from letting others stand with you. As Mateo and Emily danced nearby, their laughter mixing with the music and chatter, it was clear that this day had become about more than just raising money. It had become about raising hope. The sunset painted the sky in warm oranges and pinks as Daniel, Angela, Mateo, and Emily walked along the quiet neighborhood streets. Their footsteps echoed on the sidewalk, accompanied by Mateo's excited chatter about the day's events. The boy skipped ahead with Emily, waving the balloon animal he'd received at the fundraiser. "I still can't believe how many people came," Angela said softly, hugging herself against the evening breeze. Her dark hair caught the fading sunlight, and her eyes sparkled with leftover tears of joy. Daniel smiled, his hands in his pockets. "People want to help, Angela. Sometimes they just need a chance to show it." The children's laughter floated back to them as they rounded the corner onto Angela's street. The modest apartment building stood ahead, its brick facade warmed by the setting sunday. Mateo turned and called out, "Mom, can Emily come up and see my new science project?" Angela glanced at Daniel, who nodded. "Just for a few minutes, kids, it's getting late." The children bounded up the stairs ahead of them, their energy seemingly endless. Daniel and Angela followed more slowly, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the narrow stairwell. Each touch sent tiny shivers through Daniel's body, reminding him of feelings he thought he'd buried years ago. When they reached Angela's apartment, Mateo dragged Emily straight to his room, their excited voices carrying through the small space. Angela paused at the door, her hand resting on the frame. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of nervousness. "I make a pretty mean cup of Colombian brew." Daniel's heart skipped. "I'd love some." In the kitchen, Angela moved with practiced grace, measuring coffee grounds and heating water. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her hands work, noticing how the tension she usually carried in her shoulders had eased. "You know," she said, not turning around, "I've been thinking about something all day." "What's that?" She poured the steaming coffee into 2 mugs, her movements deliberate. "About how long it's been since I let anyone help me, since I let anyone in." Her voice wavered slightly. "Years, actually, since Mateo's father left." Daniel accepted the mug she offered, their fingers brushing. The contact lingered longer than necessary. "I understand," he said quietly. "After Sarah died, I built walls so high I thought they'd never come down." Angela looked up at him, her brown eyes soft with understanding. "What changed?" "You did." The words came out before he could stop them. "You and Mateo. That day in the gym." He set his mug down. "When I heard him scream, something broke inside me, like a dam cracking." Angela's hands trembled slightly as she set her own mug aside. "I've been so afraid," she whispered. Afraid of depending on anyone, afraid of letting Mateo get attached, afraid of— She swallowed hard. Afraid of feeling anything for anyone. Daniel took a step closer. "And now?" "Now?" A small smile played at her lips. "Now I'm still afraid. But maybe that's okay." Their hands found each other in the small space between them, fingers intertwining naturally, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. The touch was electric, sending warmth spreading through Daniel's chest. From Mateo's room, they heard giggling. "They're holding hands!" Mateo's voice carried clearly, followed by Emily's shushing sounds and more laughter. Angela blushed, but didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed Daniel's hand tighter. "They've been plotting this, you know, both of them." Daniel chuckled. "Emily's been dropping hints for weeks, not very subtle ones either." "Like mother, like daughter," Mateo announced, appearing in the doorway with Emily. Both kids wore matching grins. "All right, you 2 matchmakers," Daniel said, reluctantly letting go of Angela's hand. "It's getting late. We should head home." Emily nodded, but her knowing smile didn't fade. She hugged Angela, then Mateo. "See you tomorrow?" "Count on it," Angela replied, her eyes meeting Daniel's over the children's heads. At the door, Daniel paused. The moment felt important, weighted with possibility. Angela stood close, her presence warm and real. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. For being there when we needed someone. For not giving up on us." "Thank you for letting me in," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Their eyes held for a long moment, both understanding that something had shifted, something precious and fragile and full of hope had begun to bloom. "Good night, Daniel," Angela whispered. "Good night, Angela." In the car, Emily was uncharacteristically quiet, watching her father with a gentle smile. Daniel's heart felt light, expanding with joy he hadn't experienced in years. The steering wheel seemed to guide itself home, his thoughts filled with the warmth of Angela's hand in his, the trust in her eyes, the possibility of tomorrow. As streetlights flickered past, Daniel felt himself glowing from within, knowing with absolute certainty that a new chapter of his life was beginning. The fear and loneliness that had been his constant companions for so long seemed to fade with each mile, replaced by something brighter, something that felt remarkably like hope. The morning sun streamed through Angela's kitchen window as she hummed softly, preparing breakfast. 2 weeks had passed since the fundraiser, and life felt different, lighter somehow. The constant weight of worry had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by a gentle warmth that seemed to follow her everywhere. Daniel sat at her small kitchen table, helping Mateo with his math homework while Emily drew pictures nearby. These morning visits had become their routine, a simple rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Angela couldn't help but smile as she watched them, Mateo's tongue sticking out in concentration while Daniel patiently explained multiplication tables. "Look, Mom." Mateo held up his completed worksheet, beaming with pride. "I got them all right." "That's wonderful, my amor." Angela ruffled his hair as she set a plate of toast in front of him. Her hands didn't shake anymore when she carried things, and the dizzy spells had become less frequent. The medicine the doctors prescribed after the fundraiser seemed to be working. Daniel caught her eye across the table and smiled. That warm, steady smile that made her heart skip. "He's a quick learner," he said, his voice carrying a hint of pride that made Angela's chest tighten with emotion. The day passed peacefully. Angela's shift at the diner felt manageable for the first time in years. Her new manager, hired after the community's intervention, treated her with respect. She even got to take a proper lunch break, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. That evening, after her shift, Angela felt unusually tired, but blamed it on the busy dinner rush. She tucked Mateo into bed, kissing his forehead and listening to his prayers, always including thanks for Daniel and Emily now. "Love you, Mommy," Mateo mumbled sleepily. "Ti amo, mi cielo," she whispered back, switching off his lamp. The first wave of dizziness hit as she walked down the hallway. Angela steadied herself against the wall, taking deep breaths like the doctor had taught her. But this felt different, worse than before. The room began to spin violently, and her chest felt tight. She barely managed to grab her phone from the kitchen counter before the second wave hit. The world tilted sideways as she collapsed, her trembling fingers finding Daniel's number on speed dial. "Angela?" His voice seemed to come from very far away. "Daniel," she gasped, terror gripping her chest. "Something's wrong. Mateo, please." The phone clattered to the floor as darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. Daniel's heart nearly stopped when he heard the thud through the phone. "Angela? Angela?" He was already grabbing his keys, shouting for Emily to wake up. The 7-minute drive to Angela's apartment was the longest of his life. He found her unconscious on the kitchen floor, her skin clammy and pale. Emily immediately ran to wake Mateo, while Daniel called 911, his military training kicking in as he checked Angela's vital signs. Her pulse was rapid and irregular under his fingers. "Stay with me, Angela," he whispered, cradling her head in his lap. "Please, stay with me." The ambulance arrived in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. Mateo's terrified face as Emily held him, his small body shaking with sobs, would haunt Daniel for years to come. "I'm scared," Mateo whimpered as they followed the ambulance. "I know, buddy," Daniel replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. But we're going to be right there with her. I promise." The emergency room was brutally bright after the dark night. Hours crawled by as doctors ran tests, their faces growing more serious with each result. Daniel paced the waiting room, Mateo finally asleep against Emily's shoulder, until the doctor called him aside. "Mr. Carter?" The doctor's expression made Daniel's stomach drop. "We've found some concerning complications. Miss Ramirez's condition is more serious than we initially thought. The temporary treatments we prescribed aren't addressing the underlying issue." Daniel's throat felt dry. "What does that mean?" "Without aggressive, long-term treatment, her prognosis is poor. We're looking at potential organ failure within months." The doctor's words fell like stones in Daniel's chest. "She needs specialized care, regular monitoring, and medication that's, well, it's quite expensive, even with insurance." Daniel nodded numbly, his mind racing through calculations. The fundraiser money, his savings, his daughter's college fund, none of it would be enough. They let him into Angela's room once she stabilized. She lay small and fragile against the white hospital sheets, an IV dripping steadily beside her. When her eyes fluttered open and found his, they were filled with tears. "Mateo?" she whispered. "He's safe. Emily's with him." Daniel took her hand, careful of the tubes. "They're both sleeping." Angela's face crumpled. "I heard the doctors talking." "Daniel, I can't. What's going to happen to my baby? I can't leave him alone." Her voice broke as sobs shook her thin frame. Daniel gathered her carefully in his arms, mindful of the medical equipment. "Shh," he murmured into her hair. "You're not alone anymore. We're going to fight this together." But Angela couldn't stop crying. "The treatments they're talking about, I can't afford them. I can barely afford rent now. And Mateo. Oh God, Mateo." Daniel held her until she cried herself into an exhausted sleep, his shirt damp with her tears. When he was sure she wouldn't wake, he slipped out into the corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he sank into a hard plastic chair, his head dropping into his hands. The weight of it all pressed down on him. Angela's life hanging by a thread, Mateo's future uncertain, his own heart breaking at the thought of losing her. After his wife died, he'd sworn never to let himself be this vulnerable again. But here he was, terrified of losing another woman he loved. The quiet of the hospital corridor pressed in around him as he sat there, overwhelmed by fear and the enormous challenge ahead. The steady beeping of monitors and distant murmur of nurses provided a soundtrack to his racing thoughts, each one circling back to the same devastating possibility, losing Angela. The hospital corridor felt endless as Daniel walked toward Angela's room early the next morning. His footsteps echoed against the sterile walls, each step heavy with worry. The flowers he carried, bright yellow daisies, seemed out of place against the stark white surroundings. Through the doorway, he saw Angela sitting up in bed, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked pale, but managed a weak smile when she saw him. Mateo was curled up in a chair by the window, absorbed in a comic book Daniel had brought him yesterday. "Good morning," Daniel said softly, placing the flowers on her bedside table. "How are you feeling?" Angela's fingers twisted in the thin hospital blanket. "Better than yesterday. The doctors say I can go home tomorrow, but—" She glanced at Mateo and lowered her voice. "Daniel, I need to talk to you about something important." Daniel pulled up a chair, his heart tightening at her serious tone. "What is it?" "I've been thinking all night," Angela began, her voice trembling. "I have family in Arizona, my aunt and uncle. They're good people. They've always offered to help." She swallowed hard. "I think it might be best if Mateo stays with them for a while." Daniel felt like someone had punched him in the chest. "Angela, no. Please, let me finish." Tears welled in her eyes. "The doctors say this treatment could take months. I might get worse before I get better. I can barely work. I can't take care of him properly, and if something happens to me—" Her voice broke. "He needs stability, a real home." "He has a home," Daniel insisted. "He has us. I can't keep depending on you like this. It's not fair to you, or Emily." Angela wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You've done so much already." Neither of them had noticed Mateo had stopped reading. The comic book slipped from his hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. When they looked up, his face was ghost white, his eyes wide with terror. "No," Mateo's voice cracked. "You can't send me away." He scrambled off his chair, rushing to Daniel's side. "Mateo, honey." Angela reached for him, but he backed away, pressing himself against Daniel. "Please don't let her give me away," Mateo sobbed, his small hands clutching Daniel's shirt. "You're my dad now. Please don't let her." The raw desperation in his voice shattered something in Daniel's chest. He wrapped his arms around the trembling boy, remembering how his own daughter had cried after losing her mother. The same fear, the same desperate need for security. "Mateo," Angela's voice was thick with tears. "Baby, I'm not giving you away. I just want what's best for you. You're best for me." Mateo turned to face his mother but didn't let go of Daniel. "I don't want to go to Arizona. I want to stay here with you and Daniel and Emily. We're a family now." Daniel held Mateo closer, feeling the boy's tears soaking through his shirt. The weight of this moment pressed down on him, not just Mateo's tears, but the responsibility of the love this child had placed in him. He thought of all the times over the past weeks, helping with homework, sharing meals, watching movies together. Somewhere along the way, these moments had woven themselves into the fabric of his life. Angela's monitors beeped steadily in the background as she watched them, her own tears falling freely now. "Mateo, I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of not being strong enough for you." Daniel stood up, still holding Mateo, and moved to sit on the edge of Angela's bed. "You don't have to be strong alone anymore," he said gently. "Remember what you told me about feeling invisible? You're not invisible to us. You're not alone." Mateo lifted his head from Daniel's chest, hiccuping slightly. "Please, Mommy, don't make me go." Angela reached out, touching her son's wet cheek. "Oh, mi amor," she whispered. The fear in her eyes warred with the love there. Daniel took a deep breath, his decision crystallizing. He shifted Mateo so he could look into the boy's eyes. "I won't let you lose her," he said firmly. "Or me. We're going to fight this together, all of us." Mateo's breath hitched. "Promise?" "I promise." Daniel looked at Angela, letting her see the determination in his eyes. "We'll figure this out, whatever it takes. Medical bills, child care, everything. You don't have to send him away." Angela's hand trembled as she reached for Daniel's. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," Daniel said softly. "I'm choosing. We all are." Mateo wiggled between them, wrapping one arm around his mother and keeping the other firmly around Daniel's neck. The three of them sat there, connected by touch and tears and something deeper, something that felt remarkably like family. Daniel's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone in the hospital parking lot. The morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, but he barely noticed, his mind racing with determination. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the first name. Mike Torres, his old platoon sergeant. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar gruff voice answered. "Carter? That you, brother?" "Mike, I need your help." Daniel's voice cracked slightly as he explained Angela's situation, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She's got a young son, Mateo. They're family now, and I can't lose them." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Say no more, brother. Let me make some calls." Within hours, Daniel's phone buzzed constantly with messages from his old unit. Mike had activated what they called the Battle Network, veterans helping veterans, and in this case, helping one of their own support someone in need. Social media posts spread like wildfire through veteran groups, each sharing Angela's story. By afternoon, Daniel sat in his living room surrounded by Emily and 3 of his former Army buddies. They hunched over laptops, making calls, and coordinating with local veteran support organizations. Emily brought them coffee, her face bright with purpose. "Dad, look," she pointed to her phone screen. "Mrs. Peterson from church shared the story. She says the ladies' auxiliary wants to help too." The living room became a makeshift command center. Jake Mitchell, who now worked at the local news station, made a crucial suggestion. "Let me call Sarah Chen. She's one of our best reporters, does human interest stories. This is right up her alley." Daniel hesitated. "Angela's pretty private. I don't want her to feel exposed. We'll do it respectfully, Jake assured him. Sometimes the best way to help someone is to let others see their story. With Angela's careful permission, Sarah Chen arrived the next day. She sat with Angela in her hospital room, listening intently as Angela shared her journey. The discrimination she'd faced, the struggle to provide for Mateo, and how Daniel and the community had become her lifeline. The story ran that evening. Local veterans rally around single mother fighting for her life. Sarah's sensitive portrayal of Angela's strength and dignity, combined with the community's response, struck a chord. The online donation page they'd set up began pinging constantly with notifications. Neighbors Daniel had barely spoken to stopped by with casseroles and offers to help. The owner of the local grocery store called to offer free delivery of groceries to Angela's apartment. Mateo's teachers organized a rotation of after-school care volunteers. But it was the veterans who truly mobilized like a well-oiled machine. They contacted medical foundations, negotiated with the hospital's financial department, and coordinated with healthcare advocates. A Vietnam veteran who'd become a successful businessman matched donations dollar for dollar. 3 days after the story aired, Daniel sat in his car, staring at the final tally on his phone. The number blurred as tears filled his eyes. They'd raised enough to cover Angela's immediate medical needs and create a safety net for her future care. He practically ran through the hospital corridors, the printed fundraising report clutched in his hand. When he reached Angela's room, he found her sitting up in bed, looking tired but alert. Mateo was curled up beside her, working on homework. "Daniel?" Angela's voice was concerned. "What's wrong? You look." He pulled up a chair and took her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." He showed her the report, explaining how the community had come together, how his military family had mobilized, how strangers had opened their hearts. "We're going to fight this together," he said firmly, squeezing her hand. "You and Mateo aren't alone anymore. You have an army behind you now, literally." Angela stared at the numbers on the page, her free hand covering her mouth. Mateo looked up from his homework, his eyes wide with hope. "Does this mean Mommy's going to be okay?" Daniel met Angela's tearful gaze, his heart full of determination and love. "It means we're going to give her the best possible chance. Together." "I don't know how to thank everyone," Angela whispered, overwhelmed by the generosity. "You don't have to," Daniel replied softly. "Just focus on getting better. That's all any of us want." Through the window, the afternoon sun painted the room in warm light. In that moment, surrounded by love and hope, the sterile hospital room felt less like a place of illness and more like the birthplace of something beautiful. A reminder that even in the darkest times, community, compassion, and courage could light the way forward. The paper with the donation total sat between them, but it was more than just numbers on a page. It was tangible proof that they weren't alone, that love could mobilize armies, and that sometimes the biggest battles were won, not with weapons, but with open hearts and joined hands. "We're in this together," Daniel repeated, and this time the words carried the weight of thousands of helping hands behind them. The chemotherapy ward buzzed with quiet activity as nurses moved between patients, checking IVs and vital signs. Angela sat propped up in a reclining chair, her thin hospital gown making her look smaller than usual. Daniel watched her from his seat beside her, noting how she tried to hide her trembling hands by clutching the blanket draped across her lap. "You don't have to stay for the whole treatment," Angela whispered, though her eyes betrayed her relief at his presence. "It's going to be hours, and you must have other things to do." Daniel shifted his chair closer, his voice gentle but firm. "There's nowhere else I need to be." He reached for the water bottle on the side table, unscrewing the cap before handing it to her. "Small sips, remember what the nurse said." Angela took the bottle, her fingers brushing against his. The touch lingered, warm and reassuring. "The kids are with Emily's Aunt Susan, probably spoiling them with too many cookies and Disney movies." Daniel smiled, watching some of the tension ease from Angela's shoulders. "Everything's taken care of." A nurse approached with Angela's medication chart, her cheerful demeanor brightening the sterile space. "How are we feeling, Mrs. Ramirez?" "Just miss," Angela corrected automatically, then managed a weak smile. I'm okay. A little nervous. That's perfectly normal, the nurse assured her, adjusting the IV drip. Mr. Carter here hasn't left your side since you arrived. You've got good support. After the nurse left, silence settled between them, broken only by the steady beeping of nearby monitors. Angela's eyes grew distant, fixed on the clear liquid flowing through the IV line into her arm. I never thought I'd be here, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. All those years working so hard, trying to do everything right. She swallowed hard. Now I can't even work. Can't take care of Mateo properly. I'm just a burden. Daniel leaned forward, his heart aching at the pain in her voice. Angela, look at me. She turned slowly, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. You are not a burden, he said firmly. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. The way you've raised Mateo, how hard you've worked, how you've faced every challenge with grace, you're incredible. A tear slipped down Angela's cheek. But now everyone's having to help me. The fundraiser, your military friends, the community. I should be the one helping others, not— Stop, Daniel interrupted gently, taking her hand in his. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let others help us. You've spent years being everyone else's strength. Let us be yours now. Angela's fingers tightened around his. I don't know how to do that. I've been alone so long. You're not alone anymore, Daniel said, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. You and Mateo, you're not just people I'm helping. You're— He paused, searching for the right words. You're a blessing. To me. To Emily. You've brought light back into our lives. Angela's eyes widened slightly, more tears falling. Daniel, I mean it, he continued. After losing Sarah, I thought that part of my life was over. Being a husband, sharing dreams, building a family. But then, you collapsed in that gym, and somehow it was like God was giving me a second chance. Not just to help someone, but to live again. Angela's free hand reached up to wipe her tears, but they kept flowing. I'm scared, she admitted. Not just of the treatment, but of hoping too much. Of letting myself believe in this, in us. Daniel stood, careful not to disturb the IV line, and perched on the edge of her recliner. Then let me believe enough for both of us right now. You focus on getting better. I'll be here, every step of the way. The afternoon wore on, sunlight shifting across the floor as nurses came and went. They talked about small things. Mateo's improving grades, Emily's soccer games, funny stories from Daniel's army days. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, Angela dozing off occasionally only to startle awake and immediately look for Daniel. As evening approached, exhaustion finally overtook her. The last round of medication made her eyelids heavy, her words becoming slower and slightly slurred. Daniel? She murmured, fighting to keep her eyes open. I'm right here. Thank you for making me feel like a blessing. Her grip on his hand relaxed as sleep claimed her, but Daniel didn't let go. He watched her peaceful face, remembering her strength, her gentle smile, her fierce love for Mateo. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as shadows lengthened outside the window, but Daniel remained still, Angela's hand clasped safely in his, guarding her rest. The November sun cast gentle rays through the hospital garden's trees, painting dappled shadows on the stone path where Angela sat on a wooden bench. 3 weeks of treatment had left her tired but hopeful. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and some color had returned to her cheeks. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth seep into her bones. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Daniel approached, holding a bouquet of yellow and pink roses wrapped in white paper. His army jacket was replaced by a soft blue sweater, and his usual military posture seemed more relaxed. His eyes lit up when they met hers. "These are for you," he said, holding out the flowers. "The yellow ones reminded me of that sunshine dress you wore at the fundraiser." Angela's fingers brushed against his as she took the bouquet. "They're beautiful," she breathed in their sweet fragrance. "But Daniel, you've already done so much." Angela. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The garden was quiet except for a few birds chirping and the distant sound of traffic. "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, noting the serious look in his eyes. Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath, his hands clasped together. "These past months, watching you fight so hard, seeing your strength." He paused, searching for the right words. "I know some people might think I'm here out of duty or pity, but that's not it at all." Angela's fingers tightened around the flower stems. "Daniel, please, let me finish." His voice was soft but determined. "When I lost Sarah, I thought that was it for me. I'd be Emily's dad, focus on work, and that would be enough. But then you and Matteo came into our lives." He turned to face her fully. "You didn't just need help, Angela. You helped me too. You showed me what it means to never give up, to face each day with grace, even when it feels impossible." Tears welled up in Angela's eyes. One escaped, rolling down her cheek. "I love watching you help Emily with her Spanish homework," Daniel continued, his voice growing thick with emotion. "I love how you remember everyone's favorite foods. I love your laugh, even when you're trying to hide it behind your hand. I love how brave you are, even when you're scared." He reached out, gently wiping away her tear with his thumb. "I love you, Angela Ramirez. Not because you need me, but because knowing you has made me whole again." Angela's shoulders shook as more tears fell. She clutched the flowers to her chest, their petals catching her tears. "I tried so hard not to fall in love with you," she whispered. "I told myself you were just being kind, that someone like you couldn't possibly." She drew a shaky breath. "But every time you walked into a room, my heart would jump. Every time you helped Matteo with his homework or brought us dinner, I fell a little deeper." Daniel's hand found hers among the roses. "Tell me," he encouraged softly. "I love you too," she confessed, her voice stronger now. "I love how gentle you are with the kids, how you never make me feel weak for needing help. I love how you see me, really see me, when I felt invisible for so long." Daniel's other hand cupped her cheek, turning her face toward his. Their eyes met, years of loneliness and fear melting away in that single moment. Slowly he leaned forward, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, Angela closed the distance between them. Their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss that held all the promise of tomorrow. The roses tumbled forgotten into her lap as her hand found his shoulder, steadying herself in this new reality where love wasn't just something that happened to other people. When they finally parted, they stayed close, foreheads touching. The garden seemed brighter somehow, filled with new possibility. Their kiss had sealed more than a moment. It had sealed a future, one they would build together. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of Daniel's house, now their house casting a warm glow across the granite countertops. Angela stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while humming softly. The familiar scent of coffee and maple syrup filled the air, mingling with the sound of children's laughter drifting down from upstairs. 3 months had passed since her recovery, and life had settled into a beautiful rhythm. The moving boxes were long unpacked, their contents finding natural homes throughout the house. Angela's colorful throw pillows now adorned the living room couch, while Matteo's artwork decorated the refrigerator alongside Emily's school awards. "Mom, have you seen my blue sweater?" Emily's voice called from upstairs. Angela paused, spatula mid-flip. It wasn't the first time Emily had called out for Mom, but usually she caught herself and switched to Angela. This time, the word flowed naturally, without hesitation. Her heart swelled as she called back, "Check the laundry room, sweetie. I folded it yesterday." Footsteps thundered down the stairs as both kids raced to the kitchen. Matteo, still in his Superman pajamas, slid across the hardwood floor in his socks. "Morning, Mama." He wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing his face into her side. Emily appeared moments later, wearing the found blue sweater, her long hair still messy from sleep. She stopped short, a slight blush coloring her cheeks as she realized what she'd said earlier. But seeing Angela's warm smile, she relaxed and joined the morning hug. Daniel entered the kitchen, already dressed for work in his crisp, button-down shirt. He paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of his family, his heart full at how natural it all felt. "Something smells amazing," he said, crossing to kiss Angela's cheek. "Ew, Dad," Matteo giggled, covering his eyes but peeking through his fingers. The word Dad rolled off his tongue easily now, a testament to how far they'd come. Angela served up plates of heart-shaped pancakes, a Saturday morning tradition they'd started when she first moved in. The kitchen island had become their favorite gathering spot, all four of them perched on bar stools, passing syrup and sharing stories. "Remember when we could barely fit all our stuff in here?" Emily asked, cutting into her pancakes. "Now it's like everything has its perfect place." "Including us," Matteo added with his mouth full, earning a gentle reminder about table manners from Angela. The morning light caught the simple silver ring on Angela's finger, Daniel's promise of forever, given 2 weeks ago. It wasn't fancy, but it represented everything they'd built together: trust, healing, and love. As they ate, they fell into their usual morning chatter. Emily talked about her upcoming science project, while Matteo enthusiastically described the dream he'd had about flying. Daniel and Angela exchanged knowing looks over their coffee cups, their hands finding each other under the table. After breakfast, the kids helped clear the dishes, another new tradition that had formed naturally. Emily showed Matteo how to load the dishwasher properly, the big sister role fitting her perfectly. "Mom," Emily said again, this time deliberately, testing the word, "can you help me with my hair before we go to the park?" Angela's eyes misted over as she nodded. "Of course, sweetheart," Matteo bounced excitedly. "Can we have a picnic at the park? Please, please, please!" "That's actually a great idea," Daniel said, pulling out his phone to check the weather. "It's supposed to be beautiful all day." They moved around each other with practiced ease, preparing for their day out. Angela packed sandwiches while Daniel gathered blankets. The kids ran upstairs to change, their footsteps creating a familiar thunder overhead. Later that evening, they gathered around the dining room table, the same table where they'd first shared meals as separate families, now witnessing their unity. Candles flickered softly, casting warm shadows on their faces. The remains of Angela's lasagna, a recipe passed down from her grandmother, sat in the center of the table. Daniel stood, raising his water glass. The kids straightened in their chairs, sensing a moment of importance. Angela's eyes shone with love as she looked up at him. "To new beginnings," Daniel said simply, his voice rich with emotion, "and to the family we've become." The gentle clink of glasses echoed through the room, a musical note of joy and belonging. Matteo beamed, his smile bright enough to outshine the candles. Emily reached over to squeeze Angela's hand, the word "Mom" now feeling as natural as breathing. In that moment, gathered around their table, they were complete. The house that had once felt too big for Daniel and Emily, too empty after loss, now hummed with the perfect fullness of their blended family's love. The familiar buzz of excitement filled Lincoln High School's gymnasium. Students streamed through the double doors, their chatter echoing off the high ceiling. Angela stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, checking off names as parents arrived for the spring assembly. Her dark hair was neatly pulled back, and her cheeks held a healthy glow, a far cry from the exhausted woman who had collapsed in this very room months ago. Daniel worked nearby, directing people to their seats. He'd traded his usual jeans for pressed khakis, though he still wore his favorite navy polo shirt. Every few minutes their eyes would meet across the room, sharing silent smiles that spoke volumes. "Mrs. Carter," a student called out, waving as she passed. Angela's heart warmed at the name she was still getting used to. Just last month, in a small ceremony in their backyard, she and Daniel had made official what their hearts had known for months. The gymnasium looked different now, not just because of the fresh paint or new banners, but because the memories had transformed. Where there had once been fear and chaos, there was now purpose and peace. The spot where she had collapsed was now just another patch of polished floor, its darkness overcome by new light. Matteo burst through the doors, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. His friend Tommy trailed behind him, both boys grinning about some shared joke. They skidded to a stop in front of Angela. "Mom," Matteo beamed, practically bouncing on his toes. "Tommy doesn't believe you and Dad met right here in this gym." Angela exchanged an amused glance with Daniel, who had wandered over at the sound of Matteo's excited voice. He slipped an arm around her waist, and she leaned into his solid presence. "It's true," Daniel said, ruffling Mateo's hair. "Right where you're standing, actually." Tommy's eyes widened. "Really? How come?" Mateo straightened up, suddenly serious. He gestured first to Angela, then to Daniel. "This is my mom, and that's my dad. He saved us both." His voice carried the same conviction it had held that terrible day, but now it rang with pride instead of fear. Angela watched as Tommy listened, captivated, while Mateo recounted the story not of collapse and crisis, but of hope and healing. The way he told it, it sounded like a fairy tale. A brave soldier who stepped forward when everyone else stepped back, a mother who fought to stay strong, and a family that found each other against all odds. "And now," Mateo concluded with a flourish, "we all live together, and Emily's my sister, and everything's perfect." "Not quite perfect," Daniel corrected gently, "but pretty close." More parents filtered in, and Angela returned to her clipboard while Daniel guided Tommy and Mateo to their seats. Emily appeared, volunteering at the refreshment table, looking so grown up in her new role as student council representative. The principal began her welcome speech, her voice carrying across the now full gymnasium. Angela found herself transported back to that day, the suffocating exhaustion, the world spinning, Mateo's terrified scream, but this time the memory didn't bring pain. Instead, she felt gratitude for how far they'd come. The assembly proceeded smoothly. Parents nodded along to presentations about academic achievements and upcoming events. Students shifted in their seats, whispering and passing notes. Everything normal, peaceful, ordinary, and yet extraordinary in its very simplicity. During a musical performance, Daniel's hand found hers in the dim light. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, a habit he'd developed during her hospital stays. She squeezed back, remembering all the times his touch had anchored her through fear and uncertainty. "We've come a long way," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Angela turned to meet his gaze, finding in his eyes the same steadfast love that had given her strength to fight, to heal, to hope again. "Together," she whispered back, the word carrying all the promise of their shared future. The music swelled, and Angela looked out over the sea of faces, her family, her community, her home. Where once she had felt invisible, now she stood seen and loved. Where once she had carried her burdens alone, now she shared her joys with others. The scream that had once echoed through this gymnasium had transformed into a story of redemption, a testament to the power of compassion, faith, and love. As the last notes faded away, Angela felt Daniel's arm wrap around her shoulders, drawing her close. They stood together, watching their children Mateo and Emily, brother and sister now sitting side by side in the front row, their heads bent together in conspiratorial whispers. The sight filled her heart with a joy so complete it brought tears to her eyes. The morning light streamed through the high windows, painting everything in gold. In that moment, Angela knew with absolute certainty that this was more than just a happy ending, it was a beautiful beginning. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.